Hey man, welcome back to the Back of the Class show. And like always, I'm your host, Dami, the creator. And today, I'm gonna start off a little bit light. Just be like, thank you. Thank you for listening to the first two episodes, and thank you for coming back for the third one. And this week, lol, this week. It's actually crazy. I say this week like I'm actually recording this the week after. I literally recorded episode two like 2 days ago, and I just finished editing it like literally a couple hours ago. So it's actually it's whatever. But this week, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? And if you listened last week, you would know what we're talking about. This episode might not be that long. Just putting that out there. It might not be that long. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So I was thinking back to like a couple conversations that I have with my friends, or friend, yeah, friends, like a few years ago. One was 2 years ago, or like 3 years ago, and then the other was last year. Two different people, and it's about the topic of like of adoption. So just to put it out there, I do not have kids, never had, probably never will, because I don't fucks with them little gremlin. They're just not my vibe. But but yeah. But more specifically, what I want to talk about is like interracial families, adoptive families, and by that I mean like white parents adopting black or Asian kids, or like yeah, just kids of color. And to me, it touches a spot in my heart. Like that's kind of sauce. And actually, I'll tackle this problem from two different perspectives. So I'll start off with the perspective like it's okay for white parents to adopt kids of color because one, the kids need parents. Like they are foster kids or like orphans and things like that. So they do need parents, and I fully agree about that. Like they do deserve happy families. And two, those people want kids and they also deserve a family. And actually, I think that actually reminds me of something else. I remembered I saw something on TikTok, and this creator, this woman, basically said that adoption is not a family planning tool, and I find that very interesting because then to me, what adoption is basically just getting a kid, but like not via birth, but via like adopting, and and then it's like, okay, if adoption is not a family planning tool, then what is actual childbirth? Because a lot of people plan their kids. We'll assume a lot of people plan their kids. Some people definitely do not. And to those people, no comments. But people do plan their kids. And so it's like, okay, so if adoption is not a family planning tool, then is childbirth also not a family planning tool? Because the whole thing about this post was like you shouldn't use adoption as a means to create a family, to plan a family. But it's like, why? Because people want kids for whatever reason. That's another topic for another day. But people want kids, and some people have, especially people who adopt, have the means to take care of said kids. They have the finances and shit like that, or at least I assume they do, because adoption process should definitely ensure that shit like that is decked out in it. So so now if we just take away the aspect of like people going to an orphanage to adopt a kid, and we just replace that with people just clapping cheeks and giving birth, it's like, I apart from those two literal differences, I don't see any difference between this and that, and I don't see why adoption is a bad thing. If you ask me, I'd even say that a lot of people should look into adopting in comparison to like childbirth. But like that's just my opinion, because childbirth is a very scary thing to me for whatever reason. Not whatever reason, like there are plenty of reasons. Like There's actually this one woman on TikTok who has like a list that I think this list is like 300 reasons deep why you shouldn't like experience childbirth, and it's crazy. It's peak. And so even before that, I always looked at child. I was like, yeah, that's wild. That's wild. I don't see why someone would subject themselves to do that. But like, hey, it's not me. So like, I think a lot more people should look into adopting kids because this is gonna sound crazy. This is gonna sound peak, but there are kids who need families, and you want kids. I don't think it's such a wild idea to just do the math and be like, oh yeah, kids, families, kids, go adopt one. Because these kids are hungry mouths to feed. Like they a lot of them might not have homes. Quality of life could be suboptimal. And if you're able to have a kid, I think it's a good idea, or like it's a nice idea to adopt one because you're able to provide said kids with the things that they need for a better quality of life. But I also understand the aspect of like, I want my own kid, it's my blood, it's my things, which I get it. I get it. But it's also like, to me, it's also like, I don't see why there should be a difference between a kid you adopted and a kid you gave birth to. Just because you share DNA doesn't necessarily mean you should love them. Not, oh, peak. Just because you share DNA, I'm gonna cut that out. Just because you share DNA doesn't necessarily mean you will love them, because there are a lot of cases of like parents beefing their children. They have the same DNA, but they are beefing each other. Doesn't change shit. And also there's like a lot of times a lot of times a lot of women also experience postpartum depression. So it's like, a lot of fathers struggle to connect with their kids while they're babies, and mothers as well. So it's just like, just because you have a kid the biological way. I don't know why I did air quotes, but whatever. Just because you have kids the biological way doesn't mean that you're gonna automatically love them. So I don't see why, if you're going to have to learn to love your kid, whether you give birth to them or whether you adopt them. And that's just the truth. Like, and also it's very easy to love a baby. That's also something I don't think people take into account. It's very easy to love a baby. Those are babies. They're very, like, they have innocent. You borderline have no choice but to love them. But then the question is, can you love your kid when they're grown up? Because they're gonna become someone different from who you want them to be. Like, that's gonna happen. That's inevitable. So it's like, regardless, you're going to have to learn to love your kids. I don't see why not. I don't see why you cannot learn to love a kid that you adopted. Just my opinion. Uh but yeah, that was just something about a post that I saw. But what was I trying to say? I was trying to say, okay, yeah. So back to the main topic: interracial families, like white parents adopting white parents adopting kids of color, especially when said white parents go out of their way to adopt a kid from Africa or from Asia or from a different continent. So it's just like, why 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 are you going through those lengths? Because, hey, like, look, there's often kids in Africa, and there's often kids in Europe as well. You could have easily adopted a kid from the same country as you. Because to me, it's like, one, will you be able to provide a child with the culture, with their cultural nuances, with their cultural uh knowledge, or like wisdom and things like that? How much can you help them be, quote unquote, true to their culture? And then there's also the aspect of, where do you live? Because chances are you live in a majority white neighborhood and shit like that. Is your kid gonna become an outsider in their own neighborhood? Because that's something you should not, or like, that's something that kids shouldn't have to experience, feeling like they don't fit in where they are. Because I also heard this one person, he's a footballer, well, was a footballer. He was adopted by white parents. He was African. Well, it was Nigerian, rather. I was gonna say it was Nigerian. It was Nigerian. So he was adopted by white parents. And he said that throughout his childhood, he couldn't see a difference. For him, he couldn't see a difference between him and everyone around him until he sort of like had he gained consciousness. Let's put it that way. Until at some point his brain was just like, and it clicked. And I was like, wait a minute. And it was mostly because of the way he was treated by everyone else. He started noticing, like, so there was this game that they used to play back in the day, apparently, where it was like, who's scared of the black man? And he was like, wait, why am I always the black man that we're scared of? Why am I always the one doing the chasing? Like, because the game was like the black man chases people, yada yada yada, Anyways, and then he also noticed a difference in the way his friend's parents treated him. And he was like, wait a minute, I'm actually different. And that affected him. And that happens to a lot of kids as well. It happens to a lot of kids as well. And and also for me, to be honest, there's also the aspect of like, I guess to some extent, I do believe that a lot of white people more or less fetishize the suffering of people of color. Because if we're being fully honest, white supremacy exists, and white supremacy also provides white people with more or less a higher standing when it comes to the economical hierarchy and society and societal hierarchy of the world. And so I think a lot of white people fetishize the lower ranking, or like the lower position of people of color. And this manifests itself in a lot of different ways, like wanting to be very involved in like hip hop culture and Afrobeat culture and shit like that, and adopting black kids. Because to some extent, definitely people are doing it to like virtue signal, where it's like, oh yeah, I have a black kid. I have an Asian kid. And it happens. It really happens. And my friend made a point. It was like, why am I putting this on an innocent child? But like, for me, my response is, I am not doing like, this is not me putting this sort of label on an innocent child. It's me putting this label and responsibility on the parents, on fully grown adults. Because I think it would be very problematic and ignorant to like ignore the fact that these are very much possibilities. Because to me, I think people, if you're gonna have kids, you should have kids for the right reason. You should have kids because, yeah, because you're gonna love them, because you want to raise a good individual to society, and you would accept your kid for who they are, regardless of the outcome. And and you're like, yeah, okay, actually I have a better analogy. So people who give birth, who like have natural childbirth and things like that or whatnot, like they just clap cheeks, get pregnant, give birth, whatever. So if it's a thing where someone expects a boy, and if the child becomes a girl, if as a society we frown upon that, like, it's like, why do you want a boy so bad, you know and the other way around as well. If you wanted a girl but you get a boy, it's like, why do you want a girl so bad? And to me, it's like, why do you want a black kid so bad? Like, that's my thing. And I'm not talking, okay, instances where they adopt a kid in the same country. I hear it. I hear it. You went to the orphanage, and you like, and you clicked the most with the kid of color. I hear it. It happens. That's fine. But it's like, why are you traveling a continent, guys? A ticket from Europe to any country in Africa is like 800 euros, bro. It's like 800 bucks. Why are you going that far to specifically adopt a black kid? And it's also like, it also almost always comes up in conversations like, oh yeah, my kid is from Africa, you know and like, we're trying our best to give him, to like teach him about their culture, to teach them about their culture, him or her, about their culture, try to be there for them, try to educate them, try to be, and it's like, you didn't have to do it. And to me, it's just like, when people go out of their way, I always meet people who go out of their way to do things that are considered good. I always look them like, why did you go that far? Like, what's your reason? And this is not to say that every white person who adopts a kid of color is a bad person. No, I'm not even saying the people who do, like, I'm not even saying the people who do it for ulterior motives are bad people. I'm just saying I look at them sus. I'm just like, that's kind of weird. And it's also a thing of like, also in society, we know very much, if we're being very honest as well, in the society that we live in right now, if we see white parents with a black kid, like, we wouldn't question it too much. Like, sure, that some people would have micros of like, why, you know? But if it's the flipped instance, then you definitely start to see that that the races matter. Because if a black couple had a white kid in today's society, there's a very good chance that them niggas would be looked at like they're traffickers, like they kidnapped this kid or some shit. And it happens. There's a lot of instances where you see on social media someone calls the police because they see a black person with like with a white kid or like a very light skinned dude. So it's just like, yeah, so just like, to me, it's just like, I just don't think, like, I just see it as being a little bit like questionable, because there's no way that there's no hounds of virtue signaling in things like this, where white people go out of their way, like a lot out of their way, to adopt kids of color. And just like, this is such a trope, and it's such a trope, actually. It's such a trope to the point it was even on a show. I think it was, what's it called, was it not Modern Family, where the couple had to like get a kid from an Asian country. I don't really remember. And also, there's also the aspect of like, so I'll speak for African countries, specifically, or like Nigeria specifically. The adoption requirements for countries, for non-European countries, or like for non-European countries, are more lax. Like, they're more relaxed than the adoption requirements for European countries. So it's also, so then there's also the aspect of like, wait a minute, if you live in this country, and and your reason for adopting a kid from across the border is that you don't meet the requirements in your country, why do you think you deserve a kid in your country? So like, why? That might not have, okay, like, why do you think you deserve to have a kid that bad? Because by the rules, by the laws of your country, you're not fit enough to be a parent, but you're going, so then you decide, okay, fuck this country, I'm gonna go get a kid from somewhere that's not as strict. It's just like, kids are not property to be, to just be like traded and acquired and bought and shit like that. So just like, that's just me though. That's just me. That's just me. But anyways, like I said, this is gonna be a short episode, and I think this was more like me getting this out of my chest, because it's been on my mind, and I don't know. I think I might have naturally I did. I have no idea why. Like, it's just something, and it also came up with my FYP a little bit, so that's why I had to like talk about it. But anyways, thank you for listening to this episode as well, and you've made it to the very end of the episode. This has been Back of the Class Show, and I've been your amazing host, Dammy the Creator. Now, before you leave, you gotta do some things for me. You have to subscribe, you have to like, leave a comment, follow the socials, repost the post, and then you're good. So the socials at Back OT Class Show on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and my personals at Demi underscore the creator. And lastly, before you leave, let's add some songs to the playlist. So the last two times I added 3 Scissor songs and I added 3 Brent Fire songs. So I'm still very much obsessed with them. Like, I think the only music I listen to is actually just both of them, to be honest. But I'm gonna try to switch things up, English, switch things up a little bit. Today I'm gonna add songs from different artists. I think I'm gonna add one from Kendrick Lamar, and I think for Kendrick Lamar I'm gonna add King Kunta. Yeah, I'm gonna add King Kunta by Kendrick Lamar. I'm just bringing it back, and also because there's this one guy on TikTok, man. This take pisses me off every time I think about it. He was like, "Oh yeah, To Pimp a Butterfly was not as good as 1985. I guess it's by then some Taylor Swift album. And it was like Kendrick Lamar is not as good as a songwriter as Taylor Swift." I'm like, "Oh, I hate white men." But anyways, I'm gonna add King Kunta by Kendrick Lamar. I am going to add Lost Souls. This is me cheating, to be fair. I'm gonna add Lost Souls by Baby Keem featuring friends Brent Fires. And lastly, I'm gonna add 6 foot 7 foot. This is a throwback. This is a throwback. I'm adding 6 foot 7 foot by Lil Wayne. So I'm adding these three songs to the playlist for this week. Well, for the third episode week, whatever it is. And I hope you guys tune in again next week. And I low key don't know. This episode might offend some people, to be fair, but I hope it doesn't. Actually, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna talk about this again another day, but I'm gonna try to get a guest on because I do know someone who was adopted by white parents. But I think they all lived in the same country. So it's a very different situation from what I was talking about in this episode. But also we did speak about it a little bit. And I was like, I kind of I asked the questions and she was like, yeah, she agrees with me, but at the same time it's like, she's happy to be adopted. So 100%. I'm very happy that she was adopted as well because everyone deserves a happy family. Ooh, and one thing I didn't mention is that okay, white people do be racist. If we're being for real, white people do be racist. And I read an article because I was kind of preparing. I read an article of like, well, not just one white family, but several. But there was this one white family who adopted a girl from China, from Asia. I think it was China. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was China. 'Cause I remember reading China. Who adopted a kid from China, and like they they did not give her her bedroom. Like they just gave her like basically a closet where this kid lived in, and this kid was more or less used as a slave. So it's just like at times like this, I'm just like, yeah, I don't trust these niggas. I don't trust these colored people. So that's just my thing, and I guess yeah, I'm being prejudiced, but it's yeah, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I speak about it in therapy sometimes. Like so I'm working. I'll get better. But anyways, that's been that for this episode. Once again, follow the socials at Bicoty Class Show and at Demi underscore the creator on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. And with this, I will bid y'all goodbye and see you again next week. Bye.